get started because we've got a lot to cover, and I'm going to try and keep it to 40-45 minutes. That way we have enough time to ask questions, and you guys can grab some lunch if you need to. So let me shrink this down here, and we can move on to the next slide. If you need to contact me, here's my email address. I've also included the support@capinc.com email address because I am going to be out of town on a project this week. So you might get better and faster support this week if you send any questions to the support@capinc.com inbox, just because I am not going to be available to respond to hotline calls this week. Just so you guys know, this is a word of caution. This is a Cap Inc. recommended way of doing templates. There are multiple ways that you can configure your templates. This webinar only covers one of those ways. Basically, I went through the office and I pulled some of our engineers, including our engineering manager, Jason Pancoast, and we basically come up with a way of saying this is the way we recommend you do your templates. There are going to be other ways you can do them. We can't cover them for this particular webinar because of lack of time, but I will point out a couple of them, and if you want to go that route, you'll have to do a little bit more research into that area. So the type of templates we're going to cover today are part templates, the toolbox and how to set them up, assembly templates, and then sheet format, which is basically your title block, the drawing template itself, and then your bill of material template. The first thing that you're going to have to do on any of your part, assembly, or drawing templates is set up your tools options. And that can be found actually under tools options document properties. You can see I have a graphic here on the screen, and I'm going to show you how to get into that in SolidWorks in just a minute. But you can see from the graphic there's two tabs, and one of the tabs is called Document Properties. Anything that's on that Document Properties tab is the stuff that only applies to the current document, and if you save that document as a template, it's going to affect every part, assembly, or drawing that you open or start creating from that particular template. Things that can be tweaked on here is your standard. If you want an ANSI standard, you can choose that, and it will tweak everything for you. However, if you want to veer off of the ANSI standard in some way, or if you want to change your units, maybe you want to switch it to millimeters, maybe you want to switch your number of decimal places, you can do that all from this particular tab. And I will walk you through how to do that when we get to the part template itself. So here's the part template that we're going to go over. We're going to set those document options. Then we're going to dive into something called custom file properties. And this is found under File Properties in the SolidWorks menu. There's going to be two major tabs in there that you're going to use. One has to do with just the part file and setting up a property that applies to the part in general. The other one has to do with configurations, and if you want different properties for each configuration. Now for this webinar and to save some time, we're only going to deal with the parts. We're not going to dive into the configurations. But if you want to have different configuration properties, then you can do it exactly the same way we're going to do it, just on the part tab instead of the configuration tab. There are two different ways of setting up your file properties. One is called a user input, and basically that just means you get to type in whatever you want. So if you can imagine you want a field that says part number, this is going to be something that the user is going to have to type in the part number themselves. However, there are some that are automatically updated, and you can link it to a property inside of SolidWorks. A good example of this would be material. If you want to have a property that knows what the SolidWorks material has been set to, you can actually have that as an automatic link. Another one is mass. If you have a part and you want to know what the mass is in a particular property, you can do that link as well. And the nice thing is that whenever that changes, the property will automatically update. lastly, we're going to save this as a template file. So let me go ahead and get into SolidWorks here. So here's my SolidWorks window. I'm just going to go up and actually open up a generic part file. Now if you guys are starting out with SolidWorks, you're probably going to end up having the window look more like this. And this is just using the standard part, assembly, or drawing templates that come with SolidWorks. Now in this case, we just want to use the part template because we're going to be creating our templates out of the original part. So here I go, I open up a part. Now I don't care what units this is, I don't care what standards it is, because I'm going to switch it all anyways. Okay? The way you do that is to go up to your file properties, or excuse me, your tools options, which you can also find under this little option box right here. This will take you into your options, but you can also find it under tools options. And like I showed you on the other slide, there are two tabs here, and we're going to go into that document property tab. Here is where you would set your standard, whether you want it ANSI or ISO, and we are going to set all of ours today to be ANSI. Then what we're going to do is you can go through any of these particular items and change things. If you change something that's off of the ANSI standard, it's going to let you know. For instance, if you come in here and you change your font to be something else, maybe we'll make it Comic Sans. Don't know why you'd want to do that, but if you did, it would let you know right here that you have modified this off of the ANSI standard. Now it's easy to switch it back. You just come back to your drafting standards and say, nope, I really want it to be ANSI, and it will override everything that you made changes to. One thing that will not affect the standard is the units. You can come here to units and you can specify what you want your standard units to be. And we're just going to go with millimeters, grams, seconds. And you can specify in here how many decimal places you want to take something to. We'll set that to be 3. All right? And you can play around with all kinds of things in here that you might want. If you want to change the look of your arrowhead, this is where you would do it. Now, I'm going to say OK to that, but before I do that, I want to go ahead and specify where I want my templates to be saved in the future and where I want SolidWorks to look for templates in the future. So I'm going to go to the System Options tab and go down to File Locations, and the very first thing that pops up here is called Document Templates. And you might have a few folders already listed in here. One of them might be for the tutorials that come standard with SolidWorks. Another one might be for wherever you set up your templates originally, or where SolidWorks, when it was installed, set up the templates originally. I'm going to add a new location, and for you, most likely this is going to be a network drive that is shared by everybody at your company. But for me, I'm going to go ahead and save this into a documents folder that I have set up specifically for this webinar, so that I can, there it is, template webinar, and there's my webinar template. So that's where we're going to save all of our new ones, and that's where SolidWorks is going to look for any of the templates we create in the future. And I'm going to say OK. And yes, I want to add that search path. All right, now what that did for me is it changed my units on this particular document, but it hasn't specified any new document I open because I haven't saved the template yet. We've got more to do before we save that template. But I do want to show you something. If I come up to my new icon, you're going to see if I go to my Advanced tab, I now have a new tab called Webinar Templates, and that's because I added that new file location. And you can see there's 3 documents in here. We're going to add a new one. We're going to have one called Webinar Part, Webinar Assembly, and Webinar Drawing. And then we're going to also add our bill of materials and our sheet formats as well. Before I save this as the part template, though, I need to add in my file properties. These are found under File, properties. And here are two tabs that are very important. One's called custom and one's configuration specific. Now, they actually look very similar. The only difference is the custom tab is a property that goes for this entire part file. The configuration specific one isn't for the entire part file, it's for each configuration. So if you have multiple configurations and you want a property called material, because every configuration you have is set to a different material, you would want to add that particular property to the configuration specific tab. However, if all your part file or if all your configurations are the same material, you can add it to the custom tab. All right. Today we're going to pretend like we don't have any configurations. My company doesn't do configurations, so we're just going to put everything on this custom tab. Now I've got a few things I'm going to add. The first one's going to be description. Now the nice thing about SolidWorks is they've already went through and created some of these property names and put them in a nice drop-down box for us, but you don't have to use them. Maybe instead of description, you want it to be something else. Maybe you want it to be title, something that's not in this list. Maybe instead of part number with an NO right there, you want to spell out number, or maybe you want the pound sign. You can do that. These are just recommendations. They don't have to be used. But it's nice because you can just click on it and it will put it in there for you. Now, because I don't know what this part is going to be titled every single time, I want to put something generic in this box so that if we put this part into an assembly and then later on pull it into a bill of materials on a drawing, it will be very easy to see if the user never typed anything into the description. So I'm going to put in something generic. I'm just going to put in about 6 X's there. And then I'm going to go on to the next one. And we're going to have one called part NO, or part number. And I'm going to go ahead and type in X's, but I'm going to use the numbering scheme. That way the user knows what the numbering scheme is they should use when they actually type this number in. The next one we're going to add here is called material. Now, I could have this the same way where the user could type in the material name, but I prefer to actually link this to the SolidWorks material. And the way you do that is to click the box, and instead of typing something in, you can go to this drop-down menu. And this will list all kinds of things that you can link it to in SolidWorks. So I'm going to link it to the material property in SolidWorks. And it will actually tell you what it evaluates out to. And you can see this one has not been specified. So that way you know that this part has not been told what kind of material it needs to be. And for those of you who is not aware, you can actually come over here, right-click on material in the model tree, and set your SolidWorks material. A couple other ones we're going to add here just to keep things consistent is we're going to add in the weight, and I'm going to link that one to the mass. And currently this is 0, which makes sense because nothing has been modeled in this part yet. And then we're going to add one called finish here. And I'll just put in a couple X's here. There we go. And once you have that done and all of your evaluates out is done and is equal to the generics, then you're just going to say OK. Now we want to save this template. Okay? The way you do that is to come up to File, Save As, and then here's the trick. You actually have to come down to the Save As type and save this as a template file, part templates, right here. It will automatically jump to a location. Now keep in mind, this might not be the location you set up. This might be one of the tutorial locations or the default location. So you might have to browse to the location, which we're going to have to do here. I guess I should have set up a shortcut on my desktop to make this a little easier. But we'll just browse into it. There's my template webinar, and there's my folder for my templates. And we're going to call this webinar part. Whoops, it helps if I spell webinar right. Part. And we'll get rid of the 1. There we go. Now we're going to save this. And then we're going to close it because we don't actually want to create a part with this right now. So I'm going to close it out. And then if I go up to my new icon and go to my webinar template tab, you can see I now have one called webinar part. And I could probably get rid of my other generic one if I wanted to. So now if I open up this webinar part, you can see if I go up to my system options and go to my document properties tab, it is set to be ANSI modified with the units to be millimeters, grams, seconds, and my decimal places to 3 decimal places. And my file properties have all of the properties I added to it. So you don't have to go through and add those every single time. They've been saved to the actual template themselves. All right, the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm just going to actually sketch a generic little part here. Doesn't have to be anything grand. And I'm going to extrude it for our next step. Because later on we're going to have to do a bill of materials and I want to show you how it works. So there we go. There is my particular extrusion. And maybe we'll set our file properties. We'll call this block. We'll call this part number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And let's say that the finish is going to be smooth. And as far as the material goes, I need to set the material, and let's set it to plain carbon steel. There we go. And we'll save this as a, file save. And we're just going to save this as part file. We'll call this block right here. So let's go back to our PowerPoint slide. So the next thing that we want to do is we want to set up our toolbox to have the same custom file properties that we just created in our part file. And the reason we want to do that is so that we can have the same title block and the same bill of materials on our drawings, and they will pull the same information out of a part file or a toolbox file. Now, Toolbox has their own way of doing things, but unfortunately to use what they call part number in their description, you can't set up the custom properties the way I just showed you in the part template. Like I said in that third slide I think I showed you, there's more than one way to set up templates. So we're not going to go in the way that the Toolbox has already defaulted. We're going to show you a new way of doing it. Like I said, it's not the only way, but it is the way we recommend. So just keep in mind there is something called part number, and we're going to ignore that for the toolbox themselves. We're actually going to add in our own custom file properties. So let me show you how to do that. Now to save some time, I actually have already done this for the toolbox. I'm going to go up to my Tools options, or this little icon here will take me to the same location. And I can come down to my System Options tab, Whole Wizard Toolbox, and I will specify that I want to configure this. Now just keep in mind, most likely you're going to want to make sure this is pointing to a shared location so everybody can use the same toolbox at your company. You can really get yourself in trouble if everybody has their own toolbox. So just keep that in mind. We're going to configure this once and then be done with it. So I'm going to hit Configure, and it's going to launch this wizard for me. Now in 2012, the first step up here is for the whole wizard. You can set things up. We're not worried about the whole wizard today. We're going to jump to step 2, which is customizing your hardware. Now as you can see, I've already went through and unchecked the different standards that I don't want to use and only left the ones that I did. Now down here is my custom properties. And you can see I've already added the description and the part number. You could add more. You could add material, you could add surface finish, anything that you wanted to add, you could to here. Now because I added it to the Toolbox Standard folder, every single part file in here will have these custom properties. Now if you wanted to browse into, say, the ANSI inch, into the keyways, and you wanted to add a custom property to only the keyways, you could do that. You would add it by clicking this little button here that says Add New Custom Property. You would type in the custom property name, and you would type in the default value. There is something called a list, and what this will allow you to do is to choose multiple values, and then when they add that particular toolbox part to an assembly, you will have a drop-down box to choose from. In this case, we're just going to leave it alone because it does take a little while to save the toolbox, and we don't have time to do that in our webinar. So I'm just going to leave this all set up the way I've done with just the description and just the part number. Most likely we're not going to want a surface finish. Maybe you might care about materials. If so, you could add that. I'm not really going to worry about that today. And I'm just going to close this out. And I'm going to go and create a new assembly. Now we haven't created our template for our assembly yet, so I'm just going to open up the generic assembly. And I'm going to bring in a toolbox part so you can see what happens. So here is my toolbox. I have the ANSI inch. I'm going to bring in some kind of hex head and just drop in a heavy hex bolt here. And over here you can see, here are my custom file properties that I added, the description and the part number, right? Up here is the default, what Toolbox gives you for part number, and if you click add, it will actually have a description file. Now, some people like to keep these the same. If so, it's just brute force. You type it in one place, you type it in another place, and you keep them the same. You don't have to, because the way we're setting up this template, we're ignoring this part number and this description. Okay? If you wanted to use this part number and this description, you actually have to set up your other templates differently, and you don't get as many choices in setting things up that way. That's why we are showing you this alternative way of doing things. If you're interested in this, you can do a little research on it. But it's not as user-friendly, and like I said, you don't get as many choices in that option. So I'm going to hit cancel, and you could type in your description, your part number once, and because this would be a shared toolbox, anybody who adds in this heavy hex bolt of this particular size and this particular length will not have to enter in that information again. It will remember that information the next time. So with the toolbox, you only input it in once, and then it will remember it from then on. All right, let's go back to our template, or our PowerPoint here. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to create our assembly template. And it's very similar to creating our part template. We're going to start with a generic assembly, and then we're going to add in any document properties that we would want to change, what our standard is, what our units are, that kind of thing. Then we'll add in any custom file properties. Same thing, you can add it for configurations or without configurations. You can do the user input or the automatic updates. And then you're going to save this as a template file. So very similar to how we did the part files. So let me go ahead and do that. We're going to start a generic assembly, and then we're going to go up to our Tools options right here and go to our Document Property tab, and we're going to set it to be an ANSI because that's what we were sticking to. Our units, we're going to be millimeters, grams, seconds with 3 decimal places right here. All right. I'll say OK to that. And then I'm going to go up to my File Properties, and I'm going to add in some custom properties. Now, Some of these are going to be the same as in your part document. So maybe you would want a description for this assembly, and you would set in the same generic. Maybe you would have part number for your assembly. Something like that. But you wouldn't have a material because this is an assembly. It's going to be made up of multiple parts that could all be a different material. But you might want to know the weight still. So let's do the weight, and let's set it equal to the mass of the entire assembly. Just keep in mind that this mass is pulling in the mass of each individual part, and if someone did not set their correct material in the part files, this mass might be off. You could do other things in here if you wanted to. If you want to specify whether this is a subassembly or not, there's all kinds of different ones that you could choose from, or you could create your own just by typing in a name. Once you have all your custom properties set up, you're going to go up to your file, Save As, and save it as a template. And we want to browse to our Documents folder for wherever your templates are set up. Mine are set up in that webinar folder here. And we're going to call this webinar assembly, and save it. There we go. So now, if I go up to my new icon, you'll see I now have one for webinar assembly, just like so. I could browse and bring in my block that I created before. Drop it in there, right? And then I could also bring in a toolbox. Let's just bring in that heavy hex bolt, and we'll just drop it in here, just to demo purposes. And maybe we'll actually give this a description name. I don't know if they'll let me copy this or not. We'll see. Yeah, it did. And maybe we'll just call this, I don't know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Actually, I think I named the other one that same thing. So let's do this one different. We'll just do a bunch of 1s. There we go. And we'll save that. And I don't want any more. So there we go. We have those two set up. And we're just going to save this assembly. And yeah, we'll just call this block assembly. Something like that. And later on we'll pull this into the drawing and create a bill of materials for it, and you can see how everything will work. Alright, so let's go ahead and go back to the PowerPoint slide here. The next thing that we're going to be doing is called sheet format. And this has to do with the title block of a drawing. Now you can still set up on the drawing itself. You're still going to set up your document options because the font and stuff like that is going to matter to your title block. You're also going to set up custom file properties on the drawing. You don't have to, but a lot of people want to have things such as drawn by, checked by, that kind of thing on their drawings themselves. So you're going to actually set up file properties for the drawing themselves. And these will get saved in the next step, which is called the drawing template. But then you're going to actually create this title block. And there's something called define title block, which we'll get to, which will actually let you tweak the file properties in the part files and the assembly files just by double-clicking in these individual boxes that they're linked to, which is pretty cool. I'll show you that. And then you're going to save the sheet format template. The next one would be the same thing as the part file, which is the drawing template. So these two things could sort of go hand in hand, but they are two separate things. Okay? So we're going to sort of do them both at the same time, but you can see that we're going to save out a sheet format template as well as a drawing template as well. So let me go ahead and open up a new drawing here. And we'll just bring it in as an ANSI landscape here. Okay. And I do want to bring in a generic part file or assembly file. Now the reason I want to do this is because I want to link different text in this title block to some of those file properties we created in the parts and the assemblies. So for instance, this drawing number, I don't want it to say draw 1. I want it to actually say what the part number is in whatever part is placed on this particular drawing. So to create that link, I actually need to put a generic part or assembly on this drawing. And that needs to be created with the templates. And if you guys remember, I created the block using my new template. And I'm just going to go ahead and put a view like so on there. It doesn't have to be anything spectacular to set it up. Like I said, it's only there to help get us started on this template. And you'll notice some of the stuff updated, but it didn't update the way I want to for my company, because I don't want drawing number to be called block. I want it to pull in my actual drawing number from the part. So I need to tell it to be different than that. So the way you set up this particular title block is to right-click anywhere in space and say Edit Sheet Format. When you edit the sheet format, your view disappears, but everything that's part of the title block sort of turns blue, and that's because it's just the lines. Now, you can do all kinds of things here. For instance, you could maybe put in a new area. You can even insert in pictures. And let's see if I can find, I think I had a graphic in here to add. There it is, cap ink. All right, and I'm going to shrink it down here. Maybe. There we go. There you go. You could add your company's logo in there if you wanted to. And you would basically make this look the way you wanted your title block to look. If you didn't want certain sections, you could remove them. It's as simple as using your sketch tools up here to create whatever it is you want. Now, I do not want this particular box right here to say block. I want it to link to the part file and say the drawing number. So what I'm going to do is double click this. It's just a note, and I'm going to hit delete or backspace to clear out the font that's in there. And then I'm going to come over here to this little icon called Link to Property. It's going to say, what do you want to link to? The current document? Well, the current document is actually the drawing itself, and that is the file properties on the drawing template, which we haven't created yet. But if you wanted to link to one of those, you could. The other one is Model and View, which this annotation is attached right here. That would be if this particular note was connected via a leader line, or if the note was actually dropped in a view so that when the view moves, the note moves with it. The other option is Model and View specified in Sheet Properties. Now, as far as I know, this is the very first view that is added to your drawing. And if that view is deleted, it goes to the second view that was added to the drawing. So in this case, that would be the isometric view that I created. So I'll use that. This option down here is component to which this annotation is attached. This would come into play in an assembly if you have a note that is connected to a leader line to a specific component in an assembly. Then you can look at its file properties. But we're going to go with this one right here. And once you choose that option, if you click this down arrow, you can see it lists out all the different properties. It has the ones that we created: description, finish, materials, part number. There's weight right there. It also has some other ones in here as well. You'll notice they have a lot of SWs in front of them. Those are the ones that are generic to SolidWorks. They will be there every single time. You can reuse them. These are only going to be there if the part you put on this drawing was created using the template we just created. So we're going to actually link this to the part number property and say OK. And you can see right there, it actually brings in that particular part number from the part itself. Let's see what else we can do. You can see there's the plain carbon steel. Now, unfortunately, lots of times it doesn't always quite fit. You might have to play around with things. You can see smooth was already there. There are some other ones too. One's called drawn by, there's check by. These right here, we want to actually add to the drawing themselves. So I'm going to go ahead and accept this sheet format with this icon. And we're going to jump into editing the actual drawing template. First thing that I'm going to double check is that my standard is ANSI and that my units are the millimeters. Obviously, if there was other things you wanted to change, you could do that as well. And then I'm going to go up to the file properties on this drawing. And I'm going to add in a few. Now, because we're running short on time, I'm not going to add in all of them that this particular sheet wants, but I am going to just add a few. Here's drawn by, and most likely you're probably going to want to have 3 initials in there. Maybe you'd want a drawn by date, so you could bring that in right there. And like I said before, if you don't want to use the ones that SolidWorks offers, you don't have to. You could put something else in there. Make that a capital. We'll do 2 more. Let's do a revision right here. And maybe we'll start this with a dash. Maybe that's what you want your first one to be. You're assuming that this will be your first revision. Or maybe we'll start with 2 zeros. Some people do that. Let's do a checked by. Where is it? Checked by with a couple initials and a check by date. There we go. Now, I had other ones. You could do engineering approval and the date for that. You could do manufacturing approval. You could do QA approvals, all kinds of things that would make sense on these drawings. But for lack of time, we're not going to worry about that today. Once you get those in there, you're going to go back to editing your sheet format by right-clicking. And now we can specify, which it looks like they've already got these set up, that they are going to have those linked to them. Now you'll notice my font is maybe too big here. You might want to tweak that. Maybe you'd want to make it smaller, or maybe you wanted to make these particular lines move over. Move your font over. You know, maybe something more like this. You'd have to play around with your options to get it to look the way you want it to look. Now, this is the part that a lot of people don't know about that is actually very, very cool. Since all this was done for you because of the last time I ran this webinar, let me show you how you would put these in if they weren't already linked. For instance, this revision right here, let me zoom in on it. And I'm going to actually delete this note as if it wasn't there. The way you would add these in is just to go up to your annotation toolbar, choose your note, drop a note in wherever you wanted it, and then go over to your properties, link to property right here. And in this case, we're going to link it to the current document and choose revision. And it links it just like that. You could then just move it around. You could change the font if you wanted to. Completely up to you. The last thing that I'm going to show you for the sheet format is called title block, or defining the title block, which is very, very handy. Normally, the way people edit these headings is to open up the file properties of either the drawing or the part or the assembly. However, we're pulling these from multiple locations. These are from the drawing template. This one and this one are from the part template. And sometimes you even have things being pulled from an assembly template. And you don't want to have to go to all those different locations to edit the file properties. So by defining the title block, you can actually have the user double-click any of these boxes, type in their value, and it will reach back into the right properties and edit it there. Let me show you what I mean. I'm going to right-click and say Define Title Block, and make sure this box goes around all the inputs, okay? And then what you want to do is fill this blue box over here with the inputs you want the user to be able to edit. Also make sure you put them in the box in the order that you want to hit the tab key. For instance, you probably want to go from this box to this one, then this one to this one, this one to this one. You wouldn't want to go from here down to here every time you hit tab. So make sure you click the boxes in the order that you want the tab key to work. So you just go through and choose the text boxes, and it looks like these are off slightly because we didn't put anything in there. We'll go with block, drawing. Now the weight, that is one that you can't actually type in. It's linked to an actual property. But we can do revision. We could do smooth over here. Plain carbon steel is linked to the material of the part, so we can't do that one. That wouldn't be one that the user would input in. But you can keep going if you wanted to. And you'll say OK and exit out of the sheet format. So now we need to do two things before I show you how all of our templates work. You need to save your sheet format. You can go up to File, Save Sheet Format. And the reason you want to save this sheet format is you might have multiple sheet formats for different sheets. Like if you want one sheet format for sheet 1 and a different one for sheet 2 through 8, you would want to have these as different names and be able to replace them on the fly. So you would need to have different names for them. So we're just going to call this webinar. There we go. That's our webinar sheet format. And then we want to save the actual drawing template. So I'm going to go File, Save As, Drawing Template, and browse to my folder for all my templates here, which is right here. And we're going to call this one Webinar Drawing. It is saying that it can't actually put that message that said OK to. It's because I actually had a part file link to it, and it's saying you can't actually link to a specific part file. But what it's going to do is it's going to put an isometric view of any drawing into this view. If you did not want that, you could delete the view before you save the template. Or if you wanted front, top, right view, something like that, you could have actually put those in, and then when you hit OK, it would have put a front, top, right view of whatever part or assembly you wanted. It's just a way of predefining views. All right, so I'm going to close this out, and I'm going to bring in, or excuse me, I'm going to actually open a new webinar drawing, and I'm going to bring in that block assembly again. Now, I could also specify this one right here and tell it which view, what model to actually insert right there and use it. Maybe. I'll figure that one out later. We'll just delete it for now. And it will update correctly. Now you'll notice I had to do a Control Q to get it to pull this information in. A Control Q is just a rebuild, and it pulled in that information. Now, if you guys remember at that defining of the title block, I said you could actually control what's in these boxes. You can do that by simply double-clicking and saying, I want to put in initials right here, and today's date is 07/09/2012. And what's nice about being able to do this is it actually goes in to the file property and makes those changes for you, which is actually very, very handy. It will go and actually find where those links are and make those changes for you. Now let's go ahead and go back to our template. I know we're getting close on running out of time here. The last one is the BOM template. We'll go through this one really, really quickly. I'm going to close this and I'm going to open up the drawing. Delete that real quick. And let's insert in a model view of the assembly that we created. And it doesn't matter which one, we'll just drop it in like this. And now we want to actually create a bill of materials for these items. You're going to go up to Insert, Tables, Bill of Materials, specify the view, and right up here it's going to ask you which template to use. Well, we haven't created a template yet, so we're just going to use the standard. You can specify which type of template. We're just going to do top level to save time and say OK. And there is our template. Now you'll notice it has the correct part number for the block, all right, except it's called block and not the part number. The reason is, if you look, it's called part number, but it's not the part NO that we used in our custom properties. This is the same part number that the toolbox was using that we said, in our case, doesn't work for us. So what you need to do is tweak this template to look for the custom property part NO. And the way you do that is to double-click the B, which is the heading up here, and instead of having the column type be part number, you're going to tell it to be a custom property of part NO, and it pulls in the part number. Same thing over here on description. I'm going to double-click the C, and you can see it's already linked to the custom property called description. Now you could add in more columns. Let's do one just real quick here, one to the left, and maybe we're going to link it to the custom property called material. And you can see it will pull that in for you. Once you get all your headings linked and looking the way you want them to, what you do is you right-click the toolbar or the bill of materials, and you hit Save As, and you save it as a template file. And it should automatically take you to where your templates are located to. And we'll just call this webinar BOM, like so. And now if you add in a new template, or excuse me, a new BOM, Insert, Tables, Bill of Materials, choose your view. You can browse to wherever you needed to go. It will remember the last one you used, and it will automatically have the correct links and the correct columns for you. Now I think that was everything that I had to show you, but I do want to let you guys know the last time we ran this particular series of webinars, Elba Gloria followed up with an EPDM template webinar, and that one has been recorded. So if you're interested in knowing how to do templates in EPDM, just drop us an email and we can send you the link to that particular recording on taking these templates a little bit further into EPDM and using what I've shown you today, but adding in all the miracles that is EPDM along with that. Now, that is all I had to show you. So if there's any questions, feel free to let us know. Elba, have you seen any questions pop up?
I had one question and you answered it. I answered it immediately, but then later on you also demonstrated it.
Very good.
But I have nothing else. One
Okay.
person asks, what is EPDM? EPDM is our enterprise product data management system. As long as you have, this is my belief, as long as you have more than one person working on more than one version of any part, assembly, or drawing, then you need something to manage your data so that it doesn't have to be you, because that becomes another full-time job. So there are a couple of different kinds of EPD or PDM systems, work with PDM and Enterprise PDM, and Enterprise PDM really is magical. I don't know if I'll be giving that particular webinar again since it has been recorded, but I do want to point out that Enterprise PDM templates are very different. The word template is being used, and you do use all of the things that Crystal just taught you, but the actual template itself, what the object is very different than what you've gotten used to SolidWorks templates being. So it's a little bit of a nomenclature confusion, but definitely watch that video. It's great, great magic.
Very good. Well, do you have anything else to add, Elva, before we sign off?
Hold on, we have a couple of questions. Can you apply
Okay.
a template to a part or assembly after it's created?
The answer is no. You would actually have to go and tweak those things individually. Unfortunately, there's no way of overriding its original template. It's just a starting point. So if you have a part file and an assembly, you would have to go and add those custom properties automatically. Although I have designed some APIs, so if you're thinking of you have hundreds of files and you would love to change all of its custom properties so that you can start out fresh, there are APIs that can be created that will run once on your parts and your assemblies and update them to match your current templates, but there is nothing out of the box that SolidWorks offers to do that.
Thank you. And